Yes. How can I help you, Mark? I'm assuming you're a Christian first.
No, I'm not.
Okay. So how can I help you? Go ahead.
Okay. So I have two questions.
Okay.
So two main questions.
So can you clarify first what you believe in?
I'm an agnostic atheist.
Atheist. Okay. Go ahead.
Agnostic atheist.
Yeah, that's fine. No problem.
Okay.
Okay. Go ahead.
So my first question now is, I want to make a statement, and I want to see if you agree or disagree. And the statement is simple: human
Okay.
beings are capable of creating and worshiping gods. Is that statement true or false?
Creating and worshiping gods?
Yes.
It's a false statement.
Okay. So it means that Vishnu is real, Zeus was real.
I said
It
it's a
means
false
that.
statement. I don't agree with the statement.
So you mean that? So because the question I made is
But
that
I
human
said it's
beings.
false. I disagree with the statement.
Okay. Please, why do you disagree with the statement?
Okay, yes, that is the right question to ask now. Thank you. So the response to why I disagree with the statement is because the minute you say creating gods, that is a paradox because God is uncreated. So if anyone creates anything, whatever was created is not God. So humans cannot create God. So your statement is factually incorrect.
Okay. Okay. I
So
see
when
where you
people
come from.
created, these images and
The
ideas,
people who
none of them
created
were
them.
God. None of them
Okay.
were God because God is not created. So yeah,
Okay.
people made up certain ideas about Zeus and Thor. None of this is God because God, by definition, is uncreated.
Okay. So let me kind of. I understand what you're saying, and I think yes, you have a point there.
Okay.
But did the people who were worshiping Zeus probably for maybe thousands of years,
Okay.
did they believe that he is God?
Yes, they were wrong.
That's really the question, isn't it?
Yes, they were wrong. They believed something which was incorrect. Just like there are people now with thousands of years worshiping cows. Like it means nothing. They're still doing it till
Okay.
today.
So
They're
whether
still
they were
wrong.
wrong or not, they didn't know they were wrong. I know
Okay.
they did
And
it for thousands of years, sometimes maybe even longer than Islam has
okay.
existed, and they worship this God. So my
Okay.
point is simple, that
Uh-huh.
people have created, they've created gods, and people have worshipped
That's
gods.
incorrect.
Oh, okay, that's incorrect. You said
Yes.
people believed that the
People
gods
created
they're
false
worshiping.
ideas. People created idea of false gods. People worship false
Exactly.
ideas. That's how you should put it, and I'll accept it. No problem. Yeah, we all agree with that.
Okay. So
Uh-huh.
then my question then becomes,
Okay.
if somebody were to walk up to me and say, this is a God who created everything, and you should believe in this God. So
Okay.
me knowing that people have worshipped gods or believed that they were worshiping a real God
Uh-huh.
who were created by people, you understand?
Uh-huh.
And they did this
Uh-huh.
for a very long time, and we've done this hundreds and hundreds of times. I think
Uh-huh.
scientists say there have been maybe hundreds of gods in the past of humanity. So if
Yes.
somebody comes to me, is it wrong for me to be skeptical at first and say this is likely
No.
man-made? Okay.
Fantastic. Like this is excellent. This is the right behavior, the right approach to take. Is what I'm gonna say.
Okay.
You'll be
So
very. It will be the basic default position of every rational human being to take.
exactly. So it means if somebody came to me and said, okay, Allah created the universe, my first response should be skepticism. This is
No
likely
problem.
one of those who was created by people. All right. So
Well, not really. No, you cannot
I'm
make an
saying my first,
argument.
I'm not saying informed, I'm
No,
saying
no,
my
you said
first reaction.
likely. You said likely it is also a false idea. So I disagree. Just because other ideas were false does not necessitate it is. A rational human being, what he would do is he will investigate the evidences or the reasons or why this person says that Allah created the universe. And then he will base his conclusions based on the evidences and the rational facts. If there are facts or reasons and evidences that this is the case, he will accept it. If there isn't, he will reject it. That's what a rational person would do.
Yes. But again, what I'm trying to say is
Hmm.
we know that humans have done this. And so from where I'm standing, and I'm looking at this as a person who doesn't believe in a God. So the
Uh-huh.
question that I'm asking is, okay, if humans have been doing this in a long time, is there a way we could maybe see, the signature of human beings? Because when human beings do things over a long time, they leave signatures. And the way I'm looking at this is to know if a God is man-made or real. What I would want to know is, this God, are there resemblances between this God and all the other gods that came before? That would be the first way that I might think, okay, then this could be a God, a man-made God. For instance, You look all the gods that were created by humans, or at least what the people that the gods that humans were worshiping, believing that they were real, they almost all of them, I would say all of them required worship. Worship is one of those things which the gods seem to require. It's in every religion that they have to worship the god. And then there's also some kind of
That's
punishment
false.
for not doing
That's
this and
false.
obey.
That's
Is
false.
that
That's
wrong to
not.
think that way?
Yeah, that's not every religion. But by the way, you made a statement, another important statement, which was false. You said the existence of these false ideas of God is a testimony to the sick nature of a human being. Just saying what you said, but just more clear. That's incorrect, because the reason people believed in a creator because they're born believing in a creator. That creator that created us, all of us, has put in an innate signature, what some people refer to as the signature of God, that exists in every human being. That it is
Okay.
innate. Now, where's the evidence for that? There's many evidences for that. There are studies that have been conducted. For instance, Oxford University, Justin Barrett, an atheist, in collaboration with other 50 atheists, conducted a study on children that are very, very young from 20 different countries on a period of 3 years. And they came to the conclusion that they innately believe in a divine being. Now, they brought children from atheistic countries, which means their parents did not teach them that. They brought children from China, which have the Shinto religion, no existence of the idea
I
of God,
think,
anyways.
yeah, I
So,
think I'll push
step
back
by
on that
step,
a bit.
yeah, I'll finish it and then you can push back. So, first, we've got this idea, this study. Dr. Oliver Petrovich did the same exact thing. She conducted a study on specifically Japanese children, because she had a Japanese colleague and he was telling her, we have Shinto religion, we don't have God. God does not exist in our idea, in our culture, in our society. So she conducted a study on Japanese children, and she came to the same atheists, by the way, all of them have no skin in the game to say there is a God. They don't even believe in a God. But they say that all of these children are innately born believing in a creator. If you look at every civilization in human history, they have some sort of a higher deity or higher entity that they believed in. They believed in something that was above. They believed in something that was higher than themselves. You look, for example, at the Native Americans. You have a book called The Gospel of the Red Man, where you had a Christian, he went and he looked at their beliefs and he realized that they believe in the creator, transcendent above all of that. So there's an innate idea that has been, as I said, with all of these evidences shown historically, that humans have this innate idea of a divine, something higher than themselves. Now, you will have certain people now ascribing this divinity to a false idea. For instance, they see thunder, they thought, okay, there's a god of thunder. They saw this, they said that does not mean that these people were evil. That does not mean that these people were bad. Because when they saw thunder, for instance, they thought that God was angry with them, so they need to do good. That is not that doesn't come from a bad position, from an evil nature of a human being. That's incorrect. So I'll disagree with the existence of these things. I'll say the existence of these things is more of a testimony that there is a creator, because it just strengthens this idea that it's a natural, innate thing in every human being to submit and want to worship, using your words, something that is higher than themselves. So I'll say, if what you're saying is true, it's actually more evidence that there is a creator than it is that there isn't a creator.
Okay. Yeah, I get your point. So I would push back a bit again against that, because I think that you might have misrepresented the conclusion of some of those studies. I would have to go and look at the conclusions again. So
Do it
first
now.
of all,
Welcome.
what
You
we
can do it.
know for a fact is that everybody, that human beings, especially children, we are prone to believing in simplistic explanations. So simplistic explanations means that if I were to ask a child, okay, look at that bird flying, how does the bird fly? Now, there are two ways I could go about this. A 5-year-old child, I could go and say, you know what, there's a principle called Bernoulli's principle. It deals with pressure and it deals with air movement and all of that. A child's brain can't understand that. If I say there's an invisible man holding the bird up, that makes sense. All those studies showed that children believe in simplistic explanations. We know the study of the children who were told that there is an invisible princess sitting on a chair in a room, and we know that the children believed in that. So it's not that we are innately born to believe in God, but that we are innately born to believe in simplistic explanations, especially when we can't understand them. And this is the reason why humans keep coming up with these ideas of God, like Thor, the lightning, as you said, strikes, and they say, oh, you know what, that's Thor. But as time went on, people become more knowledgeable, and then they dealt away with some of these ideas of, like the
All right.
sun god and the moon god and all those things, and
Sure.
they went into the idea of the unseen. And this is
Okay,
where we started going.
let me respond to this weak argument. A
Yes.
very, very weak response, with all the respect to you. Of course, I'm talking about the argument, not you as a person. Very, very weak response. And the reason is it's a self contradictory response.
Okay.
You said that people are prone to believe in simplistic explanations, and you brought an example where people believed in different explanations. This is the case. If children were prone to believing in simplistic explanations, they will believe in different conclusions. It's not going to be the same conclusion. Now, what these studies show, you said I misrepresented them, you didn't show how. You said maybe I've misrepresented them. I haven't. You're welcome to go do your research on your own time. And as I said, the people who conducted them are atheists. So these studies show that there is a universal idea that these children have. So it cannot be that they're believing in simplistic explanations because they're coming to the same conclusion. If it was just simplistic explanations, they would believe in different simple explanations because it's about simplicity. So whatever simple explanation be given to them, they would believe in it. But what these studies demonstrate is that these children are at a very young age, before indoctrination of ideas. In fact, if they've been indoctrinated, if they're coming from atheist countries, they would be indoctrinated with atheism. If they're prone to believe in simple explanations, they wouldn't be believing in a creator. What these studies demonstrate with a complete certainty is that it is a part of the human identity. And that's what the studies say, by the way. What just
Okay,
embarrassed say is a part of the human identity, of the human existence, to believe in a divine, to believe in a higher entity. That is a part of your
is it
existence as a human being.
okay? Is it a higher entity or in something unseen? Because okay, this is where my second question was actually about the idea of one God. Because you keep talking about a God, one being who created everything, and that people we are somehow born with an innate, belief in this God or in higher entity. Which again, if people were all having this direct connection as children to this entity, they would all probably believe in the same kind of things. But I don't think that they all believe that it is one God who talks to us through prophets and all of that. So again, there are
Anyway,
different ideas.
that's a straw man. Don't straw man my position. I didn't mention
Okay,
prophets.
okay. I'm
I didn't
sorry.
mention prophets. I didn't say a
No,
creator. Like,
yeah, I made that
yeah,
point. I
you
made
gotta.
that
Yeah,
point in
okay,
response to
okay.
children.
They all believe in the divine. That's what I said. Something above them, divine, basically has control over the. This
Okay.
is what they
Would
believe in.
aliens,
The
if aliens
attributes.
created the
The
universe, would they
attributes.
also be as something above
Just
us?
to finish the sentence.
Mhm.
Basically, they believe in something that possesses the attributes of what we call God. Whatever human beings agree, attributes of power, knowledge, these divine attributes. That's what these children believe in. Okay, what do you want to
Yes.
say? Yeah.
Yes, I get that point. And this is where I get a very interesting question here, because if you look at the attributes, powerful and all these things, I think other gods have been the people who believe them in them, at least they always say they are powerful, because I mean, what's the point of believing in something you think is divine, is beyond us, if you don't think it's all powerful? So this is one of those things that everybody seems to, who believes in a God, seems to believe the God is all powerful, and it's always like this competition of whose God is more powerful, mine or yours. Mine did this, mine is able to do this, yours isn't able to do
But
this.
you're just proving my point. If they're
Yeah,
all believing that God is powerful, that means it's an innate thing within the human being. They
exactly. But
all
the
come
things,
to that conclusion because the creator has given them that innate belief that these are the attributes that the creator possesses. So when you say these things, by the way, they're arguments against you, against the arguments you're trying to make. They're not arguments for you. When we see these commonalities between these ideas of God, these commonalities is what we say are true.
yeah,
So
but the point is that
all of
the
these people, for
commonalities are
instance,
with gods we knew were oh,
just to
sorry,
give a few
finished, yeah.
examples. No, that's fine. All of these commonalities, for instance, the all power, the all knowledge, all of these commonalities that these people agree upon is what we say is true about God. Now, what they disagree with on, that can be right and can be wrong.
Okay, because those same attributes you said, all knowing, all powerful, all of those were attributed to other gods, which we know were human made.
Again, you're making another mistake, and I thought we dealt with this in the beginning.
Vishnu is a god. Vishnu is
But
an Indian god, right?
again, I responded to this in the beginning. I'll bring you back.
Mhm.
You're using the term God incorrectly. There's no gods. It's just one. If someone uses the term for something that isn't God, that doesn't mean there's now another God. All
Okay.
it means that there's a misunderstanding of God. All it means that there's a false idea that someone has of the Creator. I'll give you a very simple example, maybe to help you understand. It's very, very simple. I can have a perception of you. I assume you're from Ghana. Another person has a perception that you're from Senegal. Another person has a perception that you're from Haiti. Until you are from one country, we have different perceptions about you. You're the same person, but some have false perceptions, some have true perceptions based on where you're from. Now, with the same thing with God, there's one God. Different people have false ideas, false understandings, false perceptions, and some have a correct perception of what that creator is. How can we know? The creator has to tell you about himself. So when you start telling me I'm from this country, then I know for a fact now you are from this country. And whatever anyone else making another false assumption about you, that doesn't mean there's another Mark now. Just because he thinks you're from Senegal, that doesn't mean there's another Mark now from Senegal. There's just one Mark, but there is a false understanding and a false belief about Mark. Same thing with the idea of the creator.
So what you're saying is that if a creator says that this is me, this is what I did, then we could believe in that creator.
If the creator reveals to us in any way about himself, knowledge about himself, this is by certainty is the only way you can know about the creator.
Okay.
If the creator doesn't reveal to you about himself, sorry, just to finish the statement, the other way you can know about God is common sense and sound rationality. For instance, certain things must be true about God that using common sense and rationality. These are the only two ways. And revelation will give you the information about God's attributes, what he wants from you, and all of that. Without that, you can make assumptions.
Yes. So in South America, we know that they have this. They had these shamans. They had religions there, and they had these shamans who were the people that communicated with their own version of God, or their own idea of God. So the God revealed to these shamans that they are God. So basically, you're saying if the God says I'm God through someone, or however they do it, then it's something we can.
That's another straw man. That's not what I said.
Okay.
Whatever revealed to the, by the way, the shaman believed in spirits and control of spirits and things like that. They're not the high creator. They are the high creator, high being. Assuming they did believe that, let's assume they accept your assumption. This is another false assumption. Where is the proof that the creator has actually communicated that to them? It's all about evidences and proofs. I'm not saying if anyone makes a claim, therefore the claim is true. I never made that argument. I didn't say if someone claims God said something. I said if God says something. These are not the same statement.
Joseph Smith said God talked to him.
That's a claim. Again, I need you to listen to what I'm saying very carefully. There's a difference between a claim God said something and God actually saying something. Now, the argument I'm making, when God actually, the creator that exists in reality, says something about himself or reveals something about himself, that's objectively true. Now, can someone claim God said something? There's many liars throughout history. Many liars that exist throughout history. How do we know the liars? I'll give you an example. You mentioned Joseph Smith. We know he's a liar because he made false prophecies. He said, for example, America will end in the 1900s. It didn't end. And he gave a specific date. He made false prophecies about wars between America and other parts, and he failed those prophecies. He was also racist as well, but that's a different issue. But the point is, there are proofs why we know that this claim that was made is. So how do you know? You investigate the claim. That's what you do with every claim.
So what's the proof for Islam?
Okay, we'll come to that. You investigate any claim, and using that claim, you come to the conclusion whether something is true or false. Now you ask the question, what is the proof that Islam is the truth? We'll say proofs are of different types. And I was just mentioning that I have a full 1 hour video or more than an hour video lecture talking about this. There are different types of proofs. For instance, some of the evidences, explicit evidences that Islam is the truth, is that Prophet Muhammad made numerous prophecies about the future. None of them are false. Many of which are specific, time-bound, people-bound, and exactly happened the way the Prophet ﷺ told us will happen. He made tens.
About future events.
And he's talking about, I'm talking about future events, things that he said will happen right at his time, in his age, after his death, few hundred years after him, today, not just in one time or another time. I'm talking about throughout history until this day, he's made numerous prophecies of the future. They all came about. So that's one evidence. Another evidence, the Prophet talked about the past. The past. What past? The past that he didn't know, meaning his community didn't know, because he was in the deserts of Arabia. They had very limited set of knowledge. The other civilizations of the time did not know. For instance, the Prophet said things about the ancient Egyptian civilization that we didn't know about because the Rosetta Stone was buried. It was discovered in the 1899, I believe, or 1799, in which we started reading hieroglyphics. And now we understood what's written in the pyramids and what the Egyptians believed. Before that, we couldn't read the writings in the pyramids. So the Quran, and no, I'll just finish this, and then you just understand my argument first. Before you say something, maybe I answered it already. So the knowledge of the past, I'm giving an example with the Egyptians. There's many other things. For example, the Prophet talked about Abraham and people in ancient Mesopotamia, and the Sumerian language was dead at the time of the Prophet, at the time of Jesus as well. And the temple that had this information is called Zugrat of Ur, and it was buried under the sand. It was not discovered. So the Prophet could not access the language or the temple that had the artifact that says the information, but the Quran mentions the information, and we discovered it after the Prophet. So there's many things like this in the Quran, and it's not in the Old Testament. It's not in the Jewish books or the Christian books. I'm talking about information exclusive to the Quran. So that is another form of evidence. Before you respond to that, take the whole evidences together. That is
Mm-hmm.
another form of evidence. Another form of evidence is the life of the Prophet himself. So we have an idea of testimony, what he did, that people testified, so what he did, and continuously transmitted information about him. His life, studying the motivations of what he was doing, what he was doing. If he was not saying the truth, what would be the reasons he was not saying the truth? What other explanations? If he wasn't a true prophet of God, there will be alternative explanations. Another evidence is the Quran talks about the natural world, talks about the universe, talks about stars, talks about human beings, talks about embryology, biology, cosmology, and all of these information that we see, that we are actually learning about today. These information are true. We're discovering the reality. We're discovering the truth. Another evidence is, I can go on and on. Another evidence is the social structure of Islam. That is the teachings of Islam, which deals with every aspect of life: social laws, government laws, financial laws, things that cannot come from one man, because you cannot be expert in all of these different fields. Now, there's multiple different evidences that we combine together, and of course, the most important is the Quran itself, and no one able to imitate it in the Arabic language. It's a very unique scripture. It has been that unique scriptures, and no Arab, atheist Arab or Christian Arab or Jewish Arab, have been able to refute that challenge. Now, all of these are evidences, and I'm just mentioning the types, and every type has many different examples. Now,
Mm-hmm.
this is how we know for a fact that Islam is the truth.
Okay. Yeah, you made a lot of points. They're interesting.
Yes, you
The
asked
first thing
questions.
about the miracles. So you say miracles are something that
I didn't say miracles.
what did you say? Prophecies,
Prophecies.
sorry.
Yes, yes, that's right.
Prophecies, not miracles, prophecies. All right,
Yes.
okay. So you said prophecies. The prophecies are something that in Islam come true. Maybe if you give me some verses of prophecies that you think came true, I could really check them out. One thing
Sure.
which I
So,
know.
so one thing you can do is you can check the lecture that I recommended to you. That is 1 hour, where I mentioned some examples, but I can give you some now if you want. But I would recommend looking at the lecture, because the lecture has different examples and the references show up on the screen, I believe, when I mentioned them. So there's many,
Okay.
many, many examples. For example, Prophet said the barefoot Bedouin Arabs would be competing in building the tallest buildings. He said the earth will puke. We have a tallest building today in Dubai. He said the earth will puke as treasures, and we can see the oil has been the treasures that the Arabs use, because the Prophet said money will become abundant within the Arabs. He named the countries that Islam was spread to, the countries that Islam is in today. He gave a time prophecy exactly when the Roman Empire is
All
going
of that
to.
is in the Quran.
Yeah, some in the Quran, some in the Hadith. We believe in the two scriptures. So both of them are in existence. So if you check the lecture, as I said, you see, look, there's many, many videos by the online as well that has the prophecies of Prophet Muhammad of the
All right.
future that you're
I'm,
welcome to
I'm,
do
I'm
research
not
on.
going to talk against something which I don't understand. The miracles, I mean, the prophecies, sorry, I keep saying
Yes,
miracle. The prophecies, I'll have to
yes.
check. What I do
Please do.
know is, what I do know
Mhm.
for a fact is that, where the prophet lived was not very far away from Egypt. I mean, you could say, okay, he didn't have any information from all of this, but if I remember correctly, his first wife, Khadija, was quite rich, and
Okay.
she married him, and so that opens him doors to maybe information that is not open to other people. I'm looking at alternative explanations here. I'm not saying
So
that this is fact, but I'm
I'm
just
gonna,
saying these are
yeah,
alternative explanations.
but
And then the
but
thing of embryology, for
no,
instance.
before wait 1 second, just before we
Yes.
move to embryology, because I want to show you why your arguments don't work one by one. So the first argument you made doesn't work, because I told you there's something called. Do you know what the Rosetta Stone is? I mentioned that to you, but I don't think you noticed what I said. Do you know what the Rosetta Stone is?
No.
Okay, so the Rosetta Stone is a stone that we discovered in 1799, I believe, or 1899, one of the two, just like 200 or 300 years ago, not that long ago. That Rosetta Stone contains a language called hieroglyphics. It's translated to Demotic language and then translated into Greek language. So we started reading hieroglyphics only after the discovery of the Rosetta Stone. Before that, we couldn't read what is in the pyramids. So if the Prophet traveled every day to Egypt and went inside the pyramids every day, which there's no historical record of that, because he was living with these people would see him travel and go back and forth. Deserts were very clear. Deserts for Arabia. Everyone will know you went somewhere and came back. People were living in neighborhoods. So even if he did that, he didn't do that clearly, but even if he did that, it's not going to help him, because he cannot read the hieroglyphics. He doesn't know what the symbols mean. We only discovered that after the Prophet, over a
Yeah.
thousand years after the Prophet.
Mhm.
So your argument here doesn't work.
Yeah, yeah. The point I was just trying to make is that we are looking at a historical event and we are trying to understand how it happened. And you're saying
No, no,
this is
no,
how it
no.
happened. He had it from God.
You were putting no. You were putting possible objections. I responded to the first one. You're welcome to
Okay.
put more
Okay.
objections. and I respond
Okay.
to them as well.
So
You cannot,
okay, so
essentially,
the
you
thing,
have no rational
if I
objection.
understand well, Mohammed was also a merchant, right? So it means that he used to travel and sell things. I don't know where he traveled to, where he sold things, and he came in contact with people.
Yes, he
And
did.
if he's a very intelligent man, he doesn't need to read. He just needs to listen. You, at a time when most people could not read and write, an
Okay, let me
intelligent man
respond to
can
that.
listen and can actually put together coherent
No problem. Now, let me respond to that.
information.
Let me
Yes.
respond to that. So, the Prophet Muhammad, according to this, is what atheists do, with all the respect. Not you, but many atheists do all
No,
the
it's
time.
okay. I mean,
Is
at least
atheists will
I'm
say,
not.
yeah,
Yeah.
atheists will say Prophet Muhammad والسلام, was an astronomer. He was a psychologist. He was a biologist. He was an astrologist. He was a geologist. He was had all knowledge in history or all different languages, including Greek, including Aramaic, including knowledge of the previous scriptures. He was the most genius, so he could bring a perfect system and a structure for humanity. He was also had somehow knowledge of the future and access to know what is going to
I
happen
don't say any
in
of
the
those things.
future. No, I'm making the claim that in order for what you're saying is true, he needs to have all of these things,
No,
because the
no, no, he
knowledge,
doesn't.
and
He
I'll
doesn't.
tell you, I'll tell you why, but you need to allow me to finish. The reason why this has to be the case is because Islam has information about all of these things. And if it was true that Prophet Muhammad was doing what you're doing, he was going around and doing hearsay, Quran would be full of false information, because he would get wrong information and true information. How can you determine what people are telling you is true or not? You're just going to listen. You're going to take the information and say it to the people. So if what you're saying was the case, the Quran will be full of mistakes, especially scientific mistakes, because the people believe the most absurd and ridiculous things at the time. For instance, that's why the Hindu scripture reflects absurd beliefs. Like there's a bull with his two horns holding the earth, there's 7 horses. But this was the beliefs of the people. If Prophet Muhammad was doing hearsay, as you said, this is what he'll be doing. He'll be getting false information and he will be transmitting it to the people. That's the first problem with what you're saying. The second problem with what you're saying is that the Prophet Muhammad, if he was doing what you're doing, another person will also have the same information. And we have no other sources other than Islam, unique information to the Quran. So if it was true that this was knowledge being surrounded, we'll find it in different sources. But we don't.
Okay, anyway, so let me push back on one of the
What
points
do
you
you mean
made.
anyway?
Let me
Okay.
put on one point. You said that if
Yes.
Prophet Muhammad needed to have all this information in order to know science,
And
psychology, and whatever thing.
let's finish with this point, because we've been talking for a while and
Okay,
we
yeah,
need
I
to
would go
I
with
need
it.
to end the
So
stream.
I
Yes,
was
go
going
ahead.
to come about the point of embryology. You said
Mhm.
there might be wrong information in the Quran or something. I happen to have a bit of a medical background. Embryology is one of those things which I've looked closely at what Aristotle and Galen wrote, and I'm
Okay.
sure you have as well.
I have.
The
I
verse
don't
in
think
the
you have.
Quran,
Go ahead.
which talks
Uh-huh.
about the formation of the human being, through the stages alaka and all those things. I'm not quite I don't
Yes,
know,
yes. Yes.
they very closely resemble what Galen lived
That's a lie.
hundreds of years before Muhammad. So if Galen lived hundreds of years before Muhammad, the least we can expect is that the information, at least the knowledge available to humanity, would have improved over time. So if Muhammad has a little bit more knowledge than what Galen wrote, that does not mean that he's having some divine, and he has wrong knowledge in it, in the sense that he was saying that the bones form and the bones are covered with flesh. I've read that a few times and that didn't make sense to me, because this is not really true. What happens is
Okay,
basically
okay. Wait.
yeah,
Just like you're making so many
yeah.
false points there. And with all due respect, we don't need to lie. With all due respect. With all due respect. Now, I
Okay.
don't think you know what Galen said. Tell me what Galen said about embryology.
Um, if you want
No,
me,
no, no. Please don't do research, because you
you
said
don't
you've
want me
done
to
research.
open and read, because I actually wrote something
No,
down.
no. You're going to research now. You said you
No,
already
I'm not
know.
going. Okay, okay, no problem, no problem. Galen
Uh-huh.
divided the stages of embryology. Also, he had about 4 stages as well. It's not really exactly
No,
like
no, that's not true.
let me give you my own answer, then you can still kind of
Okay,
disprove
go
it
ahead.
afterwards. So,
Go ahead.
so Galen also had a stage where he describes the fetus, how it looks like, maybe a drop of blood. You understand?
Maybe is that what he said? Did he say maybe a drop of blood?
It doesn't have a form yet. I don't have it. I did do some research on it, and I wrote
What
something
what
down
kind
which
what kind of blood did Galen said it's made from?
I'm not quite sure, but he did
Okay.
kind of he made that
Look,
attribute.
you're just showing me you've done no research on this. With all that's
No,
what I'm saying. With all
excuse
due
me. I'm
respect,
not claiming to be an expert. I know that
no,
it's
no,
your
no,
channel
no,
and
no,
you have to make people
no,
look stupid or anything.
Mark.
I'm just saying that the knowledge
With all due
Muhammad gives
respect,
is he's not
just
the
allow
first
me,
person to
to
give
say
it.
something. Mark, allow me to say something. We both need to humble ourselves, and we need to be careful not to make information that is false. You cannot say I'm not claiming to be an expert when you said what the Quran says is similar to what Galen says. If you say that, then you need to know what the Quran says, number one, which I know you don't, and to know exactly what Galen says. You cannot make that claim without knowing these two things. So now I would ask you to retract your statement because you clearly don't know what Galen said. And what Galen said actually was so ridiculous that he was saying that the embryo is created from menstrual blood. That was Galen's claim. If Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was saying what you're saying, the Quran would be saying that the embryo is created from menstrual blood. You had Aristotle believing the baby was a very small baby and then it grows into becoming a big baby.
Again, you know that Aristotle.
If you allow me, just allow me to finish with all due respect. So the two people you mentioned have very, very different beliefs to whatever the Quran says. So the claim that you made is incorrect, number one. Number two, if the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was taken from the Greeks is not one or two people. The Greeks is many people. The Prophet, how would he know which person of the Greeks to take information from? Number one, how would he know what parts of information to take and what parts of information to leave? You had Greeks who believe first half of the baby is formed, then the other half is formed. You had some who believe, as I said, the baby was a miniature, small baby, and then he grows, becomes a bigger baby. You had Galen and others believing the baby was menstrual blood, and then the menstrual blood forms into the baby. And Galen did not believe in the stages of the Quran mentions as nutfa and alaqa and mudgha and idha. Now, the second problem you're making, which is another fallacy you're making, you're talking about the Quran and the clothing of the flesh and this. The Quran uses a terminology that can encompass many different things. The Arabic language in this verse can encompass that they're happening in the same time and can encompass that they're happening one after the other. The Quran, the Arabic language, encompasses both of them. And none of these two contradict modern embryology. Now, my recommendation to you, this is how we should end this discussion. My recommendation to you, Mark, is to actually be sincere with yourself. First, to be sincere with yourself. It's because this life is not a game. Islam is true. All of these things I've put for you are the reasons, the absolute perfect evidences for why there is no doubt that this religion is coming from the Creator, the one true Creator that created everything. So my recommendation to you, after we're ending this call right now, is to actually go, reflect on what I said, do proper research, not what people call biased research to just, convince yourself of something you want to believe, but actually research of someone who's looking for the truth and ask the Creator to guide you, whoever that Creator is. So let's end here on this note.
Okay.
Mark,
I will check some of what you said.
No problem. I appreciate your manners.
The stone you said, and
I appreciate your manners, by the way.
I'll post embryology information on your website or in the comment section. Maybe people can.
Please email me. I'll send you information if you'd like. I'll send you videos that are specific detail in this.
Okay, no problem.
Like. Please email me, and I appreciate your manners in the end and the respectful discussion and the back and forth that was happening. All right, Mark. Pleasure talking to you. Bye-bye. See you.
Have a nice time. Bye.
You too.